Well, happy Easter, everyone. Game Methuselah here. Being that it's Easter, of course, I got up and went to a big church ceremony this morning, and my wife and I are having 20 of our closest friends over tonight for a massive Easter dinner. And we're not doing any of that. We're good shut-ins, and it's going to be my wife and I, and a few cats and our dog, and during the day we fed the squirrels, and this evening we're feeding the possums, so that's pretty much it. It's the wonderful Corona time still, and we're enjoying every moment of it, just like I know you guys are. So I thought I would just sit down now and just have a little yakety yak with you guys about just a couple small things that really aren't big enough for a video, but I always want to talk about different things. First of all, I got some more 3D printed miniatures from my new friend Jeremy over at Northern Iceworks, WERKS, and I did a video a couple ago about how to buy miniatures cheaply, and I'm really become quite impressed with the 3D printing. Now, if you check my last video, because people were asking, they were asking for a link to Northern Iceworks. I don't know how to do any of that stuff. I'm sure I could figure it out, but frankly, I'm too lazy. But someone else did, and they linked it to the site. And I just got some new figures from him, and I wanted to kind of go over them again because we were talking about them, and they're kind of like cheap compared to lots of figures out there. Even more interesting to me was a lot of people who had seen the video were telling me that there's lots of new things going on in 3D printing. Someone even told me that his local public library had a 3D printer, and for, very little money, like 70s cost miniature prices, they could go down and print out figures. And I think that's just awesome. Now, I think this is going to be a revolutionary change in the way miniatures for almost all games. Really, there's some fabulous and interesting figures out there. They're very D&D Zero style to me, which basically means they're thicker. Lead in the 70s obviously was pretty soft, so they would make miniatures with like extra support type things. These plastics do very much the same. If you look at them, they are very much extended down. They have multiple connections to their items, and that gives you more strength to the miniature. These things are almost indestructible, I think. They also would be very easy to paint because they're very Games Workshop-esque in the fact that they're thick. They have lots of open features, so they're easy to paint. The dry brushes and the washes are going to work very easy to them. And to that end, I will start to, paint some of these, doing some things that would be easy to show you how they work. First, the dwarves. They're interesting. They're a little thick. They're pretty big. So I'm not sure I'm that thrilled with them personally. And the fact that I might have, 300 or 400 painted dwarves kind of means I don't really need them. They need some interesting things. This little anvil guy here, I think, is great for an NPC town blacksmith or armorer, because every fantasy town has a dwarven blacksmith or armorer. But the really cool thing I wanted to show you were these two guys here. They're really sort of kind of iconic, open-framed, non-battle stance looking dwarf figures with neat regalia, interesting helms and gear. They're beautiful statues. So my feeling is I get one of my pillars that I showed you in how to use chess pieces for interesting terrain. You mount one of the dwarven lords that you paint up like a statue, maybe gold or mithril, maybe just stone. But you put these at the entrance to your dungeon, even if you're just using a dry erase board or whatever you're doing to try to get people there, it sets the stage that this is now a dwarven ruin or great underground mine or whatever you're doing to allow people to sort of suspend their disbelief and get into the concept of the game. I've mentioned before, of course, that the more things you add in the little greeblies and chests and statues, dead bodies, things like this, the more you drag your opponents, did I say that? Your players into your game. The other thing I got from him were some undeads. Now, he came with two types of skeletons. I think he had 3 or 4 in his list, but they're okay. They come in a lighter plastic. I'm not 100% sure why, but they do distinguish them very nicely from other figures. Again, they're pretty thick, but they would be very easy to paint, and they're not bad. I kind of like them for the same reason that they're very strong, they're very durable. I don't think they're going to break, even though skeletons tend to be very frail. But They're very serviceable and usable, and once again, they're very inexpensive. Now, again, like I said, I'm sure there's lots of other people out there doing 3D. I'm sure you can find other programs. There's your own 3D. Guys were telling me that they've just gotten 3D printers and they're starting to experiment, and they're having some great success making their own miniatures. The other thing I got were some of my favorite iconic beginning monsters, zombies. These guys were really good. The thickness of them doesn't really hurt for zombies because zombies are usually bloated. They can be still full-size humanoid. But the neat thing was there were 7 differently unique poses. Now, I'll try to put a little video of showing you all these on the end so you can just see them. I really like these zombies. I think they're really great. And for those of you DMing who know, 5th edition zombies are super excellent. I like them better than skeletons in the fact that they have that death save, that you whack them down and whatever below 0 they go, they have to make that saving throw. And if they do, they get 1 point of health and they stay in the fight. I've had some incredibly good undead fights with my players with zombies against relatively low-level players, and they're very scary. That point that you just keep knocking them down and they keep getting back up and fighting is very, very, very frightening and very much thematic to what you would like in undeads, that they're just tough to knock down and finish off. I love Dungeon Greebly. The more Dungeon Greebly you have, the better I think it is. You've seen pictures and stuff I've done. I'm sure I've even done some video and showing you some of my stuff. I love staging the set. I love the Dwarven Forge dungeon tiles. I had original dungeon tiles for Off the Rails, which were ceramic. I've used all kinds of the little cardboard maps. There's so many good things out there in maps that you can utilize that can set the stage. You add some extra stuff. I think I'm going to do a minion mambo here very shortly, and I'm going to give you like a forest opening map. I think you've seen of mine. I may even use one I have, and instead of doing it in D&D 5th, I might do it in the fantasy trip, so you can sort of see a little of that. But even though minions aren't part of the fantasy trip, they're easily addable in, and I've already done so. So it'll be fun, but you can see, I think I'll throw a lot of outside Greebly in there, that you can see how that adds to the drama of your games. And those things are great because, again, the more you can get your players to suspend disbelief that this is not real, the better your games are going to be. Now, the last thing that I got from them, which I think was very cool, was, well, a little treasure chest. You know, I only have about 20 or 30 little treasure chests, but why do I like this treasure chest maybe more than any other? I bet you already know. It also doubles as a mimic. You guys know I love mimics. I think this is about my 8th or 9th mimic. I'm beginning to believe that mimics evolve in dragon lair treasures. They're a creature parasitical that dissolve gold, sort of like Rust Monster maybe related. And the idea that is, it grows in giant hordes. Mines where there's gold left abandoned, great treasures of dragons, any place where things sort of accumulate, and parasites can get in there and eventually feed off them. And of course, the ultimate evolution is the mimic, so that when adventurers break into the treasure lair and think they've struck it rich, they could stumble upon a pile of mimics. Now, that's just me because, well, you guys already know I'm not completely well-hinged, but it's really fun, and the more things you can get, I think, the better. Try painting. Even a badly painted miniature is usually better than nothing. A miniature unpainted is better than a die or a coin. You know, more things to represent the color of your game, things that are going on, the better. And the more you make it interesting for your game master, the more you become involved, as I said, the more likely he's going to be motivated to get you a good and better, and if for sure, another game for you guys to play. The second thing I wanted to do was talk about some things that people have asked me. They all say they want to play low magic games. Now, most of them I've told I don't agree. I actually like high magic games. I love magic users. I love clerics. I like druids. I like different types of illusionists. But I think some people originally think that these things are daunting. It's harder to run a game where you have a lot of divergence in the type of characters that can come out of your game. But sometimes it's just great to go to a game system and utilize that. If nothing else, it gives you other things to look at and think about. Now, Dragon Quest, magic is very, very complex in that game. There are lots of magic users. They're very, very available, but they're very risky for them to just cast a spell. Likely they're going to fail. A backfire could be tremendous. It's very easy to lose your magic users by just sort of casting a spell right off the top because their casting chance is very low, and any sort of major fail is usually going to be cataclysmic to them. Now, they have to learn how to sort of infuse their magic into stabs and things like that, which makes it more difficult and more expensive for magic users to perform their spells, and thusly, most people tend to want to shy away from them initially and run the warriors, because the warriors are very, very simple. They get the job done. Fantasy Trip has an interesting magical system. The whole concept is if you're able to get the spell off and you can expend the expensive points to either use or maintain the spells, you can directly do damage or sleep or confuse or freeze or light them on fire, all the things that are possible in that system. But a couple other things that I thought I would point out. In 1977, this game came out. It was the first real divergence that I made from Dungeons & Dragons, Chivalry and Sorcery. Now, I think we got into it about 1978. My good friend Steve was the one who brought it to my attention and wanted to play it because it's very, very much a medieval Camelot-style heroic knights against the bad guys. And it has a whole hierarchical system. It gives you all the ranks of nobility, what the requirements were. And like Chainmail for the original Dungeons & Dragons, it was based upon the idea that eventually you would build armies. It has extensive army rules in here. It's very old school. I don't even know if they've reprinted, or I'm sure somebody has. If what editions are available, this is original 77. But the nice thing about it was very, very, very centered amongst the knights. And they were very effective. If you were a knight, you were effective. If you were a high elf, you were effective. If you were a dwarf, you were reasonably effective. Other than that, maybe a yeoman bowman. Then they were just peasants. You know, there was not a whole lot of value in running peasant class characters. They weren't very good, and they tended to die fairly easily. So often you would generate maybe a knight, have a squire, maybe some yeomen and peasantry with him, and they could be NPCs that run along to fill out the group if you don't have enough players. But normally a group of knight, very much like the Round Table, Once a Future King type concept where they're searching for, the Holy Grail. But on top of that, they have dragons and monsters and goblins and all the things you would want in a fantasy role-playing game, but not that Middle-earth type theme. Very much like Earth, feudal system, where you have loyalties and hierarchies and nobility who could be sending you on missions. Of course, I think like Matt was captivated in with the idea that eventually you're to build up to a high level of royalty, build castle, raise troops, and then play an army game. Like Matt's building up for 5th edition now, where he's come in with his stronghold and followers, and now the new one for combat, to basically make it very thematic for you to have army battles with your character. The other thing for people who wanted low magic games is another game I liked very much, Deadlands. Now, Deadlands was a really neat game that came out in, I think, the early 90s. We got very much into it. We painted a lot of Old West figures. They came out with Great Whale Wars, which was miniature battles in the Wild, Wild West with interesting monster-type creatures and stuff. It was very, very, very fun. You had interesting dice, you had different characters, you had playing cards for your abilities and stuff. They had a collectible card game they came out with. They did a lot of stuff. I really enjoyed Deadlands a lot. I ran it in my coastal city of Temecula. For those of you who don't live in California, Temecula is not on the coast, but since a great portion of California in the game had fallen into the sea, it became a coastal city and we went from there. But it's very interesting, and the other thing about it is it's very low magic. A lot of it comes just from people who played Boot Hill or just any other Old West type things. It's fun, and the only real magic users who are in it were some very mild level monsters that used magic and hucksters. And hucksters were all sort of magical manipulators using decks of cards and interesting things. It provided you a very different feel for the way your magic would work. good monsters, very, very interesting. The Walking Dead, the Hanging Judges, some kind of really cool various undeads. There were the standard interesting monsters that were there, but it was very, very, very much a fun game. But if you want to look at low magic, think about changing the context of your game. If you really are into Middle Earth, it would be a great system. Middle Earth, if you watched most of the movies or even read most of the books, was not a really high-level magic. Wish you guys all the best of spring. Hopefully our current problems will be over soon and the world will be getting back to normal so I can get back out and playing more games. I'd like to get back out there and see my friends and get some good games going face to face. So until I have a chance to speak with you again, fight me devils fight, for I hate peace. Paint on, game on, and then have a good day. Well, here are the figures that I talked about in the video. These here are the dwarves. As you can see, they're very big. They're very thick. I like the little anvil guy up here in the front. Would be great for, like I said, the NPC. The three guys in the back, they're basic dwarves. They're not bad. They're not great. I wouldn't care much for the gunner, I think, but that's just because the campaign I run. But the two guys in the first row behind the anvil guy, I thought were the ones that would make really excellent statues, because they're really not in a very much combat stance. They really are more like just in a very open stance, and that's how statues would tend to look. These are the skeletons. I liked them. I think I might paint them as zombies as well, because of the fact that they are very thick and they're going to look a little bit more closed, but they could easily be painted as skeletons, and it would be very fast to do so. And I might paint these as skeletons just to show you, but if they were mine that I was using it, you might give thought to that. More decomposed zombies work great. The other thing about doing it that way, if you paint them with the bones exposed, they could just as easily be skeletons, and that way, as I always did when I didn't have many miniatures, I would use my skeletons and my zombies sort of interchangeably. And that you could do here, and I would suggest it. These I really did love. These zombies are really cool. I have 7 of them, and they are in 7 different poses. So if you look at Northern Iceworks, WERKS, on SD, look at these guys. You look at the poses. They're very cool. They got one zombie eating something, and it's very, very, very neat. I think they're great zombies. I really want to kind of maybe get these painted. I might actually start switching some of my others out. I've got hundreds of zombies, but I kind of really like these guys. They're very much an individual, and that makes for a very cool bit when you're doing character type monsters for your role-playing games. Something to think about when you're doing low-level undeads. There's no reason for them, obviously, to stay low level. As you advance, there's no reason not to add multiple levels or difficulty, so that, the zombies don't need to be first-level monsters. You could make them 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. You could start giving them feats and skills and everything else to make them additionally nastier, so that high-level characters, even though they would normally just scoff at zombies, might say, wait, these are really nasty. And that can be a very big surprise to players who are used to just the sort of static playing it out of the book type of thing. Something to think about. Again, the big pot there, which is like a dinner pot for whatever, boiling cauldron for your witches. But it's nice, and I'm going to paint it up. I'm not completely sure how yet, but I'll paint it up and add it to my Greebly collection because it's something I didn't have currently. And of course, my always favorite Mimic. The little chest and the chest of the Mimic are the same, so it's a kind of nice little reveal. And the neat thing about that chest is once you've revealed it, you can use that chest over and over again just as a straight chest, and people will initially and always think, oh my God, it must be a Mimic. And that's always good to keep them on their toes. So I hope that's of some help to you guys. If nothing else, look into other 3D opportunities. There are people who said that there's a lot out there for very little cost. I mean, I think this might be the way of the future, especially for people who have very limited budgets, to get these things done and add to your collections.